anything's possible. I mean, Tim, coming from hillbilly world and jumping into the South Bronx, who would have thought they could have, gotten this big and traveled all around the country and, well, world, and for you guys to take with you that anything's possible, and that anything's possible through art.
Who dares to make history? Who dares to make art and make history? Who dares? Who dares? Come on, you with me? I want you to be a fish that can swim in the ocean. I want you to be a fish that can swim in a pond. A fish that can swim in a river, that can go down a waterfall. I want you to be a fish that be in an aquarium once in a while and survive. To begin, in 1981, I was recruited by a very dynamic and militant Puerto Rican American principal of a besieged and beleaguered junior high school called Intermediate School 52, which was located on Kelly Street in the then burning South Bronx. And I had just come out of grad school, New York University, and I had done a lot of teacher training. It seemed that in every single teacher training situation, the kids who just loved me the most and just ran to me were the kids that the other teachers could not stand. Often they were described as special ed, learning disabled, emotionally handicapped, academically at risk, truant, attention deficit disorder, which is my favorite one because these are kids that can play Nintendo for 7 hours straight, but they have ADD. Who's an artist in this room?
I am!
Who's an artist in this room?
I am!
Daniel, who's an artist in this room? You. We're gonna work on you, all right. Who's an artist in this room?
Me.
Who's an artist in this room?
Me.
Who's an artist in this room? How about you?
Me.
So at the age of 23, I come out of grad school thinking I'm all that and a bag of Doritos, because I was, and you will be too. And George Gallegos said, could you please come and show us how we could have a disciplined and structured art program for our special ed students? And I say, why do you want me to come? And they said, you seem to be kind of dynamic and fresh, and to be honest, we have gone through 3 art teachers in 1 year. The kids are eating them alive. Tim, with you, we want to give art one last chance. And I thought that was a very heavy burden to put on me, to give art one last chance. But of course, I rose to the challenge, and I was going to be very magnanimous. Back then, I was a pretty young, naive, coming from the piney woods of Pittsfield, Maine, your typical idealistic, liberal paternalist, all right? Oh yes, I will come and help the poor children of the ghetto. With no experience of the community whatsoever, of course. And I will be up there for 2 weeks, and then I will go back and talk about it in a self-congratulatory manner at cocktail parties and dinners and openings for the rest of my damn life. All in time we sing our coax, 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 coax.
Sing our coax, 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 coax.
So I get there, and I can't believe what I'm seeing. Kids setting bulletin boards on fire in the middle of the day, setting each other on fire. That's not funny, though. I mean, I'm literally setting each other on fire. Our school has the 2 distinctions. Number 1, it is the alma mater of General Colin Powell. I'm sure that's where he learned a lot of his battle strategies in that place. Secondly, it was deemed the most violent junior high school in the entire New York City public school system. So when I got there, I wasn't quite sure what my position was going to be. But what happened was this: I fell in love. I fell in love with a kid named Carlos Rivera, who was 11 years old. I fell in love with a kid named Nelson Sauvignon, 13 years old. I fell in love with a kid named Angel LeBrew, who's at 11 years old. He's now 23, studying American pragmatist philosophy at the University of Washington in Seattle. Talk to him every week. I fell in love with all these kids. The second thing, after falling in love with them, and their parents, and their culture, and their community, is that I was angry. I am not a missionary. I am not a good white person coming to the ghetto to help the poor ghetto children. I was angry. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was my idol when I was a little boy, 13, 14 years old. I'm still engaged with his spirit daily. And Dr. King reminds us in his great essay, The Strength to Love, that the Norse root, the etymology for the word for anger, is grief. And I grieved. I grieved that kids like Carlos, who had this incredible, visual, creative intelligence. That kid could draw like a Xerox machine. He could dance professionally. He could sing. He had this amazing intelligence that was neither recognized nor developed nor promoted by the system as it was then. Things are improving, and that's why I'm so optimistic and energetic to this day. All right? It makes me mad when kids like Cedric Constant, all right? His English teacher brings him in because nothing is happening for him in the school. He is bombing out, and he is one of the most gifted young men I've ever met across the United States. I got mad when a kid named Danny Castillo, all right, somehow was persuaded that he would never get to a really good college if he went to college at all, when he had this extraordinary skill. I was mad about it, and so I had to do something about it. So instead of staying for 2 years, I stayed in that particular school for 7 full years, plus the summers, and now we are celebrating our 18th year in the South Bronx, and the great irony is I now live 1 block away from IS 52, the place where it all began, and I'm glad about it. Art made this happen. I want to know who is the man that wrote this play a long, long, long time ago, 2,405 years ago. Everyone should know the answer. Who is it?
Aristophanes.
Who is it?
Aristophanes.
Who is it?
Aristophanes.
In 1984, we begged and borrowed and steal an NEA grant for $8,000. We thought we were rich. The National Endowment for the Arts was the only agency that believed in what we were doing. We were able to rent a studio 2 blocks away from our school. It was an abandoned gymnasium in an abandoned public school that had been taken over by militant grassroots community groups, and they rented it out to us. So the great irony is I would teach 8 periods a day, 45 minutes a period. My whole budget for the entire year would probably be on the order of $800 or $900. And as you can tell already, I have a very big mouth. So I would kick and scream and yell for this money, all right? But the problem is I'd have 35, 40 kids in the class. You had to order from a central order place, a supply depot, and you would order your supplies in September, and you'd get them in maybe April. And then, of course, everything you ordered was out. Does this sound familiar to any teachers in here? It was totally out, and so you get substitutes. You get that stupid stuff like Mr. Sketchy, those markers that smell like strawberry and stuff. I don't want my kids learning how to smell markers. Pipe cleaners, construction paper. Who the hell ever made good art out of pipe cleaners? Show me one example in the history of art of pipe cleaners. So it was an impossible situation. So the great irony was that at 3 o'clock, when that bell rang, this crazy hillbilly teacher and his crazy outsider kids that would deliberately F up in their classes so they could get kicked out and run to my room, room 318, which was affectionately called the refugee camp, banging on that big metal door, and they said we would march 2 blocks to the school. It was fantastic. I no longer needed parent-teachers night. We would get to the studio at around 3:15, and kids who were learning disabled, emotionally handicapped, academically at risk, truant, attention deficit disorder would work from 3:30 to 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. On weekends, we might be there until 11 o'clock, parents coming on up and bringing food, coming and seeing what we're doing. It ended up being a big block party every day of the week in which we made something that we hoped might mean something, at least to our community, if not to the city and maybe the world at large. We had the total audacity to believe that through the only means we had available to us, which was our imagination, our vision, our hope, and our art, that we might be able to make history. I felt it in my sternum, something pressing something deep inside of me telling me to go ahead with this project. And that's exactly what we did. So in 1987, I left the school system. I had to devote myself full-time to KOS. And that is when everything exploded. Not only were our works beloved in the community and in the homes of all the kids, but then the museum acquisition started happening. First one being the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Mark Rosenthal and Ann Donnercourt, the creme de la creme of the museum world, I think, it's one of the greatest museums in the world, acquired a painting, America 7, for $20,000. All of a sudden, we got the good housekeeping seal of approval. A man named Charles Saatchi bought 5, and within 1 month, we had made $100,000. We were off the grant train. We were independent. We could make what we wanted. And we also walked through the front door of these museums, and there we are on the wall in places of pride and in places of permanence. We made history, and we'll keep on making history. Right now, I'm very excited to tell you that the project has naturally expanded, and now we are working with KOS members that have been established in the cities of San Francisco, Memphis, Tennessee, Kansas City, and Chicago. So the whole thing, especially with the explosion in the new communicative technology, allows us to share this method and to share the joy and some of the agonies and some of the troubles and the trials and the tribulations with other folk, young kids all over the country. So when we get together, Manny and Danny and Cedric and Rick and Georgie and Ivania and all the kids in KOS, when we get together and sit around that table and begin to work, something supernatural happens. It is akin to a seance. When we get together, there's something that happens, this sort of ring of energy that occurs that draws down ghosts from the annals of history. And these ghosts are not scary ghosts, but they are our friends. The first guy that comes in and visits us constantly is a ugly dude, named Ralph Waldo Emerson. Ugly, but a genius. And he reminds us daily that it is better to never read a book than if in the reading of the book you are taken out of the orbit of your own thought. Do you get that? Books are not to be consumed so you can have advanced dinner conversation to tell people how smart you are. Books are not to be consumed so you can be on Final Jeopardy. Books are to be used, and they are to inspire you to write your own text with the very fiber of your everyday life, no matter what you're doing. Another person that comes and visits us is a kind of frail, effete French dude named Marcel Proust. We go, "What's up, Marcel?" And he goes, "Bonjour." And he tells us from his great essay on reading that all art is, in many instances, a mistranslation of lived experience. But good art makes it possible for that mistranslation to result in beauty. So it doesn't matter how little you think you are, or how unimportant you think your life is. It doesn't matter if you're put in a special ed class at the age of 11. It doesn't matter if your daddy's never been around and your mom has no money and you're on welfare. It doesn't matter. You have an experience that is worth articulating and announcing to the universe. And you must believe that if you're going to make convincing art. It is an experience that people must know about, and each and every one of us possess that power to communicate what we have been through. It is called being a witness, and no one can be a witness for what you've been through but you. We talked to Malcolm X, one of our great inspirations, who says that self-empowerment and dignity and independence must come by any means necessary. And many people thought he was talking just about violence, but I know as a witness, because I knew his widow, and she will be a witness to the fact that he was also talking particularly about art, language, and culture. And then get back to my great, great hero, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who says that there are three kinds of love, as Dr. Fahey was talking about. First, there is erotic love, eros, from the Greek, and I hope all of us know what that is. Then there is a philia, which is really the brotherhood and the sisterhood we feel for one another and allows us to have these things called societies and culture and communication. But the love that he was most concerned with from the Greek was agape love. Agape love is the kind of love that makes you love your enemy. Agape love is the kind of love that makes you break down borders. It makes you love people that don't look like you. They may not act like you. They may not dress like you. They may not walk like you or talk like you or eat like you or speak like you or have the same culture as you. But it is about a love that transgresses these stupid borders that are all put up in front of us like veils. Dr. King says that agape love is a kind of love that will go to any lengths necessary to restore community. What Dr. King called the beloved community. And what I happen to believe, after 18 years of this work and 15 solid years of art and teaching, is that I now see what we have done has been trying to recreate the beloved community. We want to know, what does democracy look like? And what I would submit to you is that these works that we have produced together with Danny and Cedric and all the other kids in KOS in New York and now San Francisco, Kansas City, Chicago, and Memphis, Tennessee, Bristol, England, and in Munich are dress rehearsals for that beloved community. When we first started working together, the whole project was inspired because Carlos Rivera, one of my kids, 11 years old, none of these kids could read. They could not read a thing. And then their teachers would often give them incredibly infantile books, like Green Eggs and Ham, which they thought the kids could read. No 12, 13-year-old from the Bronx is going to be caught dead walking down the block with Green Eggs and Ham under his thing. You get the shit beat out of you. I'm sorry. You get the shit beat out of you if you've got, Moby Dick under your arm, all right? Because you're reading. You're not supposed to do that. And so we thought, what are we going to do? So instead of just dismissing the situation, I found it interesting that kids like Carlos, all right, or Cedric or anybody, they couldn't read supposedly called by the experts who were paying tons of money, and they do nothing but tell us what our kids cannot do. I was interested in what the kids could do. And so I thought, Carlos doesn't read, but how come he can memorize verbatim side A and B of a Snoop Doggy Dogg CD? Without a flaw. There's something going on here. So what I did is I simply read to the kids. And I said, listen, don't illustrate this text. Come up with a visual correspondence. All we had was Xerox paper, #1 Mongol pencils, all of that stolen from other departments, all right? That's all we had to work with. And I said, fine, if that's what we have, we'll start with that and build on that. So I would read to the kids, and the kids would do this process we call jamming, which is very similar to improvisational dance or music, in which the kids would just draw whatever the book reminded them of, what I was reading, what it reminded them of. This way they were getting the content of the book, but not just consuming the book, but producing another kind of knowledge or information because of the impact of the narrative of the book. They were relating the book to their lives, the way Emerson told us we all should do. The first works were very graffiti-oriented. As you know, some people say, Tim, how could you come from the woods of Pittsfield, Maine, and end up in the South Bronx? And I said, you don't get it. I didn't get into the Bronx got into me. And so the heroes of the school when I was growing up, of course, were basketball players, football players. All right? If you wanted to be an artist in the piney woods of Maine, your sexuality was immediately suspect. Your mental health was completely suspect. Because where I come from, if you can't eat it, drink it, smoke it, or sleep with it, it ain't worth having. This puritanical, utilitarian, that making stuff is really almost idolatry. And in some way, you're kind of imitating God. All right? I happen to think that we are praising God through making the work, but we'll get that later. But the first works tend to be very raw, I would say vulgar, violent. In other words, we were just reproducing the image that the outside dominant community had of the South Bronx. And it got to the point where the kids, parents, custodians in the school saying, listen, this is great that you're doing this, but this isn't what we're all about. Can't we make something beautiful? Can't our community be capable of making something vibrant, vital, not sentimental, but could it be beautiful? Could it possibly be beautiful? And we thought, could this be? I was attracted to a book written in 1915 by a lonely, depressed, oppressed, persecuted, sickly, neurotic, Jewish, Czech-German author named Franz Kafka, who wrote a comic novel called America about a kid named Carl Rossman, just about the age of Cedric and Danny. He comes to America with that immigrant's dream of having fame and fortune within 1 year. He is totally destroyed, he is ripped off, he's disappointed, and he's about to go home in total dejection when he is adopted by a utopian commune called the Nature Theater of Oklahoma. The Nature Theater of Oklahoma has only 2 rules. Number 1, everyone is an artist. And number 2, everyone is welcome. And Carl looks at that placard and goes, even if this is bullshit, I'm going with it. Even if this is a failure, it'll be the most magnificent failure in the history of humankind, and I want to be part of it. Kind of like the spirit KOS and I had when we first began. And so there's this amazing scene where he goes to sign up for this commune, and Kafka has this amazing scene where everyone is playing whatever they want to on long golden horns, like a huge traffic jam, like an elegant cacophony. I asked the kids, if you could portray your spirit, your voice, your past, your present, your future in the form of a golden horn, what would that horn look like? After 6 months of long, boring-ass horns, where the kids just hated doing this project. Just, I think, out of sheer desperation and boredom, a kid who I know who now lives in West Philly, Gregorio Torres, started creating this very eccentric wild horn. And the other kids started competing. It reminded me of a great musician that I love named Dizzy Gillespie, so later that day I went and got videotapes. The next day we had Diz wailing on the video and the kids drawing like maniacs, painting on the book pages that are glued beautifully to Belgian linen. And so we started out small, and then the horns started accumulating and accumulating. Get the focus in. Until they grew into, yeah, you can ooh and ah, I love that. Right, this is America 3, which is a promised gift to the Art Institute of Chicago. So they become these, America is not this Walt Disney version of America where everyone walks alike and talks alike and eats the same food, and it is not a small world after all. It's a big world, it's a complex world, it's filled with difference, and it's filled with conflict, as we all know. And so we love to portray America as a group of golden instruments and voices, all fighting for their own time, their own space, and their own dignity. Again, it's like an elegant chaos. This is America 7, and this is the first museum acquisition, and this is kind of what paved the way for the work we're able to do now. As you can see, we got an Uzi in there. We have the AIDS virus. We have the M taken from the old German film called M, the child murder on the back. We have the ear from Horton Hears a Who. We have the cross of thorns from the Eisenheim altarpiece by Grunewald. And then we have stuff that is of our own invention. This is called America, a Refuge, which is in the permanent collection of the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington. It's up right now. And this is America 12, which was just acquired this year. Oh, I'm thrilled because that was a hard nut to crack, by the Tate Gallery in London. And we're showing you this because we're very proud of this. This was commissioned by a couple people you know, Bill and Hillary Clinton, President and Mrs. Clinton, for his inauguration poster. All right? I still like the dude. He's all right. And what's so interesting is I'm really excited about it because some of the kids remember, not only were we excited about the commission, but we had to produce it in one night. They could not decide. They were fighting on who would get it. We finally got it. They wanted to use a ready-made image, and we wanted to make something special, and so we did this in one intense evening. You know deadlines are very inspirational. And guess what, art students? You know, the day before the review, the day before, it doesn't change, so don't worry about it. It's going to be that way all the time. A critic wrote, oh, the work of Tim Rollins and KOS, you can see the passion of its making. I said, honey, that's not passion, that's panic. This is a work called The Scarlet Letter, based on, of course, the great novel by Hawthorne. How we got to this book is quite funny. A kid named Richie Cruz was assigned this book in his high school class. He comes to the studio, totally frustrated, throws the book on the table, says, I hate this damn book. And I'm going, Richie, it's The Scarlet Letter. It's by Hawthorne. It's one of the greatest novels of all time. I was waxing teacherish, you know? And he's going, well, I don't understand this shit. All these these and those and thous. And he goes, could you help me get through this crap? And I said, Richie, let me borrow the book. It's been a very long time since I read it. I remember reading it in high school, changed my life. But let me go through it and remind myself of it again so that, I'll call you up tonight and we'll start working through it. I was lying. I had never read the book. You could get to a master's level in art education and not read The Scarlet Letter from my generation. It's a sin. It's terrible. So I'm on the subway. As you know, the book has a horrible, long, turgid introduction called The Custom House. It's awful. I'm reading this. I go, oh, my God, Richie is right. This is the worst stuff I have ever read. How come everyone likes this book so much? How come I've heard such rave reviews of The Scarlet Letter, Hawthorne? This is terrible. It sucks. And then from getting out of grad school, I knew to skip. And so I went to the first chapter and the second chapter and the third chapter. And I was so moved, I literally could not do anything. I went straight home. I went through the entire book. And I called Richie up and I said, not only can I help you with this, but there's something in this for us. So like Hester Prynne, who is the great artisan of the community, but she has to wear an A because the community wants to see her as a living example of how low you can go in sin, very similar to how folk treat people in the Bronx. Sometimes I think the Bronx has to exist so people on the outside can feel so good that they don't live there. They love to hear about how we suffer. They always want to hear a sob story of what they've been through, It's weird. It's strange. And so instead of wearing a sad little A made out of rags, Hester, who happens to be the great seamstress of the Bostonian community, decides the only thing she can do in this position of stigma and rejection and marginalization is she just makes an A that Hawthorne says is resplendent in red and gold. That is the insignia of her dignity, of her pride, and her determination to overcome. And in the same manner, I asked the kids, if you could portray everything you are, everything you want to be, in the form of a golden and red A, what would the A look like? These are killer A's. You don't play with these A's, and the A's don't play with you. The Red Badge of Courage by Stephen Crane. A kid named Henry Fleming is tired of living on the farm. He wants meaning in his life. He wants struggle. He wants a red badge of courage to prove that he is a full human being. And a lot of our kids feel the same way. You want to have meaning in your life, and I think more and more, particularly in America, we have spiritual voids, material voids. Something is wrong. We don't know why we're here. We don't know what we're living for. We're not sure if we're living for each other, or are we living for the next paycheck? Are we living for the next new car? All right, or the fabulous house, all right? And so he wants a wound. And so I asked the kids, if you could show your wound, if you could open up on the inside and see what the soul was, what does this stuff look like? I talk like this because only art can give you a picture of what the soul looks like. Only art can do that. And I can't tell you how it is going to be. I can't say that's a good soul or a bad soul, but we can feel it when it all happens together, and the wounds really punctuate the skin of the text, and they're accumulated together in a huge canvas where the skin of the canvas and the book pages becomes a cosmic skin. These things look like constellations. So we go from the visceralness of a wound, of which many of us have seen and experienced physically, to a means of the beauty of survival. This is our portrait of Ronald Reagan on the pages of Animal Farm. We got to a point where the kids were reading Animal Farm in school, and they said, Tim, when can we show people we can draw? I said, we're going to do it right now. We started studying the history of zoomorphic caricature. Every time we do a project, my kids are steeped in the history of that project. So for Animal Farm, we had to study Daumier, Frida Kahlo's self-portraits of herself as wounded deer, John Hartfield's political posters of Nazis as tigers and lions and jackals and hyenas. We studied Daumier, Philippon, Granville, Travier, the great, great caricaturists of the 19th century French scene where they're all thrown in prison, because that was the day you got thrown in prison for the work you did. And a lot of people say, well, Tim, why'd you, I asked the kids, what should Reagan be? He was president at that time. And they go, oh man, he should be a turtle. And I said, I don't get it. Why is he a turtle? Dad, Tim, look at the skin under his neck. It's all wrinky. He looks like a turtle. And so we would take physical cues from, this is Jesse Helms as a barnyard dog. And we painted this before he did the NEA stuff and everything. And I'm really proud to announce that 2 days ago, we got a call. This is going to be included in that gigantic, fantastic show called America 2000 at the Whitney Museum of American Art. Out of all the paintings, everyone made fun of us for making these works, saying they were too political, too temporal. We made this almost, 20 years ago, and it's the old guy is still there. This is the center panel for the largest work we have done. It is 9 by 45 feet, and it depicts 125 world leaders as barnyard animals. And we showed this at the Hirshhorn Museum in October, just before the November election, with Bush as the foxy fox in the middle, And we like to think that we had something to do with his demise. Anyways, and as you see, there's Yeltsin there, and there is Zedillo from Mexico as a little, and Cole, and there's a little bug there. The show was canceled twice by the director of the Hirshhorn. This is during the culture wars where, the Hirshhorn's part of Smithsonian, and Smithsonian was getting into deep trouble because of the shows they were doing, and Congress was attacking them. So I'd have to go back and forth, and I'd bring the kids, and we would try to talk them into it. He goes, well, are there going to be animals fornicating in the background? I said, I don't think so. That doesn't have much to do with the content of the work. The only problem we had, and it's a hilarious story, we're there at the opening. Everybody loves it. We made it in collaboration with 24 kids at the Duke Ellington School of the Arts in Washington, D.C., one of the hottest summers on record. I'll never forget it. The piece looks great. There's only one guy that's really mad. He comes on over. He is from the Peruvian embassy. And he is livid. Do you know the Peruvian dude? His name is Fujimori. And when he talks, sometimes we look at videotapes. He's like, and he's like a little bug, like a little fly. And he was a fly. We just decided to make him a fly. And the embassy guy was furious. I do not understand why you make Prime Minister Fujimori a fly. He could have been a cat or a dog or a wonderful bird, but he is not a fly. Oh, he was pissed off. And this is the big three. And this is, I don't know, I think we've been watching Billy Ray Cyrus videos or something, but Clinton just had that achy, breaky dance going on. And that's Helmut Kohl on the left and Miyazawa on the right. This is the Autobiography of Malcolm X. It's one of the first prints we ever made. Another good story, I have a million of them. We wanted to make a silkscreen print. This was in the very beginning stages of the project. No one wanted to print it because they didn't want to do children's art. They thought we were like a charity case. They still to this day, it annoys me to no end. So we asked if the guy would make this print on pages torn from the paperback version of the Autobiography of Malcolm X. This is an insignia that speaks of fever charts, of mountains. The end is a scalpel, of course, because one reason Malcolm X gives a lot of people a hard time is that he really did do an autopsy on the racist foundations of American society. And it resonates to this day. But what was interesting is that he said, I will do it for you for $50, but don't tell anyone I did it, and I don't want to put my chop on it. A chop is when you say this comes from your studio and you brag about it. Well, anyways, after it was done, 2 weeks later, guess which is the first print ever to be acquired by the Museum of Modern Art from our work? This one. You can kiss my white behind. That's Georgie on the left and Jamel on the right. Georgie's now in Bard College studying literature with Chinua Achebe and John Ashbery. Jamel moved back down south. But I wanted to show you, and that was in our big studio that we lost, and I'll talk about that later. But what we also do is we want everyone to know that we just don't do stuff for wealthy collectors and for museums. All our images are in, not only the works are in the kids' homes, but we do t-shirts, we do posters, so that the life of the community is shared within the work. This text says, from the Autobiography of Malcolm X, I was seeking for the truth and I was trying to weigh objectively everything on its own merit. I said what I was against was straitjacketed thinking and straitjacketed societies. And that's why art is so important, and that's why art is so dangerous, because it breaks you out of your little straitjacket. In 1992, it was just an amazing year. We had shows at Dia Center for the Arts, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles, the Venice Biennale, Documenta. It was amazing. I think in 1 year, the studio made almost $500,000. Everyone was in Armani and Versace. All the kids are doing well in school. The press loved us. It was like unbelievable. And for some strange reason, and now looking back, it is a sense of premonition, we became obsessed with a text done by Flaubert called The Temptation of St. Anthony. He spent 16 years writing this book. It was his favorite book. It is about a saint named St. Anthony who is high and holy. He lives on top of a mountain. He reads a book, the Bible, all day. He only eats very low-calorie snacks. He doesn't want to have anything to do with people because it might mess up his meditation, like some full-tenured professors I know. Hello. And what he does is he's standing on the mountaintop and the devil's looking at him, saying, I'm going to get you. You make me so sick. You are so unreal. You are so not about Jesus and the Bible. You are going to be easy. And he comes down and he torments them with hundreds and thousands of awful, horrible hallucinations and temptations. And this struck a chord in us. There's a dialogue, and he says, Anthony goes, just now I glimpsed the shape of the evil one. And for some reason, we were obsessed with what is the shape of the evil one. And so what we did is using syringes, hypodermic needles, surgical tools and irrigation devices. We started using materials like blood, animal blood, and vodka. We wanted to get the text drunk so it would tell us the truth and we'd arrest the image like a poltergeist. We started creating these works that were once cruel and beautiful and sinister. This is called the Trinity. This is called the Sun and the Sea. And this is one of my favorite prints we ever made at Crown Point Press. It's an etching showing the text of Flaubert exploding. We made that with salt. And it was as if something was falling apart, and something did fall apart. In 1993, on Valentine's Day, one of my kids, who I love the most, if you see the video in the gallery, you'll meet him and get to know him and love him too, a kid named Christopher Hernandez, who I raised since he was 8 years old and was now 15. I took him in early because his own daddy was shot in the head in a pizza parlor for $20. His first job, real job his dad ever had. And he lost his life 2 weeks after taking this job. Chris was with his first girlfriend, and he gave her a teddy bear and a card and chocolates with the money he got from the studio. And he was late coming home. And he didn't want to wake his mom up because his mom was no joke. He didn't want to get in trouble. So he's waiting for his brother Juan to come home from work, which is at 1 a.m., and right after 12 midnight, 4 gunmen, hooded gunmen, came on in, and they used Chris as a decoy. Chris lived on the 3rd floor. They went up to 7th floor to kill a young drug dealer that they had beef with. And they not only killed the drug dealer and the drug dealer's mom, who was in a wheelchair, but also 3 girls that were getting ready to go to a party, and Chris. They killed him execution style on the floor. Everyone in the building was so terrified that no one called the police till the next morning. I was in London at a beautiful restaurant planning a show at the Hayward Gallery, and I get this call from the hotel saying, Tim, it's important, call, it's an emergency. And it was from Rick. And often when Rick is an emergency, it means he needs $100 for Disney World, or he broke up with his girlfriend and he's depressed. And I said, okay, fine. And we continued the conversation at dinner, and it always got around to what do you do, and I'm a teacher in the South Bronx, and the woman goes, oh my God, did you hear about this Valentine's Day massacre that happened today? And I said, no, what are you talking about? Oh, it was on a place called Prospect Avenue. And that's where Chris lived. I said, but I never thought of it. And you know what I actually said? These words came out of my mouth. I'm going to admit it to you today. I said, well, if they all were killed in one apartment, it probably had something to do with drugs, and they probably deserved it. I actually said that. And I get back to the hotel, and I called the kids, and they let me know what happened. I go on the airplane. I get to the studio, and the place is swarming with press. Telemundo, Univision, NBC, CBS, ABC, the Daily News, New York Times, New York Post. And Rick was being polite, the kids were being so polite, but everyone was in shock. And they had all of Chris's stuff all out all over the floor. And they were like, getting interviews, and Carlos would break into tears and swing the camera to him while he was crying. And I was so angry. I said, you bastards, get out of here. I lost it. I said, you should have known him, and you should have covered him when he was alive. You only like our kids when they're dead or when they've been murdered. Get out of this studio. You can't do this to us. This is a story. Get out of the studio. And something amazing happened. That incident, we had to go they caught the guy, of course. We had to go to the trial. We had to meet the guy face to face, give a statement, keep on it, deal with the continuing press. But the whole thing is that for 2 years after that, we would go to the studio, and that devil took our joy. To be honest, I could no longer go across the country and talk about how art's a way to make a way out of no way, and how art can transform your lives, and how wonderful this wonderful community is, and don't talk bad about our neighborhood, and da-da-da. I just couldn't do it anymore. It just didn't come out. And I'll be honest with you, I couldn't, the nightmares, drink myself to sleep every single night just to get to the next day. We would all come to the studio and go through the motions, but there was nothing there. I had kids dropping out left and right. Why? They're saying, Tim, is bullshit, we're just gonna die anyways. Kids that you'd worked with since they were 11 or 12 years old, turning into drug dealers, turning into drug addicts, hanging out in the clubs. Everything was falling apart. The art market crashes in '92. I get nothing but rotten press for the next months and months and months, wearing me down, wearing me down. We lose everything. We are $60,000 in debt because we try to open a school. Giuliani becomes mayor. The school is no longer going to happen. Nothing but disappointment after disappointment, and we get evicted from our studio. We can't even afford to get a truck to move. We have to leave books, we have to leave artwork, stretchers, everything. All we could take out is stuff that was in our arms. I mean, rock bottom. We got Bronx Council for the Arts to let us get back to our old studio. We could rent a storage closet for $150 a month, and they would let us have credit. So we could put some of the stuff away. So we had all this, and in 1 year, it was gone. And I didn't know if I wanted to make art anymore because I didn't want to be involved in a practice that brought me so much pain. I didn't think I wanted to do this anymore. We're carrying the stuff out, and then in a drawer, we find a portfolio. And in the portfolio are these incredible drawings marked CH. Chris was all that, and he marked his drawings like Zorro, so proud. And hundreds of jubilant, buoyant, beautiful, bouncing shapes. Nothing but joy and singing like a kindergarten class gone crazy, and underneath the title, The Frogs. The older guys in the group and I had been talking about doing the frogs by Aristophanes for years. Never could come up with an image. Chris was amazing. He would come on in and listen and soak it all in, pretend he didn't understand, and then he would come in with sketchbooks saying, maybe we could do this for From the Earth to the Moon. Maybe we could do this for Red Badge of Courage. Maybe we could do this for the frogs. And I opened that thing, and we had given all the drawings to Chris's mom. I couldn't have it. It's just too painful to see this stuff. And I'm looking at it. It's the hottest day of the year. I'm like at the end of my rope. And Georgia Brew looked at these drawings. Chris was Georgie's best friend, all right? And said, Tim, you know, with these drawings, we can get Chris back. And it was true. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought I knew what art was all about. And it wasn't until that point that we could get Chris back. And the drawings were there, and he just touched the pencil. He was there. We operated out of that little closet in the Bronx, and he was there. And we kept creating these works with other little kids all across the country. It's the same work we're doing here in Fort Collins. But with this, we got Chris back. And you know what? At that point, I really began to figure out what art was all about. It really was about joy. It's just that frogs sing this song, Brekkekex, coax, coax, coax. We are the swamp children, Greenie and Tiny, lifting our voices all the time. We Brekkekex, coax, coax. And someone says, why are you singing? You're living in hell. You're burning everywhere. You're miserable. You should be screaming in pain. They say, no, if we do not sing, we shall swell up and die. Brekkekex, coax, coax. They sing not because they want a gallery. They sing not because they want to be on the cover of Art in America, although that's nice. They sing not to sell their work. They sing because they have to, or they will swell up and die. Brekkekex, coax, coax. So you could not catch us making artwork out of blood anymore. You cannot catch us making wounds on paper anymore. We had to do something that was really about joy. And we found joy in a text called Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, written by Harriet Jacobs, published in 1861. 2 years, it was instrumental in creating 2 years later, the Emancipation Proclamation. Harriet Jacobs talks about being trapped in her mother's attic in hiding from her slave master for 7 years. The space is 7 by 9 by 3 feet. It's the exact dimensions of the work we're talking about. And the two things that get her through is, number one, prayer and the sound of her children's voices downstairs who don't even know she's up there alive. And number two, Christmas time, when about 100 of the male slaves, called the Junkanen, were allowed to have carnival in the streets for 2 days. And she would see their costumes. This is an actual Junkanen outfit that we discovered after we made the work. This is at the St. Louis Art Museum. And it's a calico wrapper covered with brightly colored cloth. She says just the colors of that cloth would get her through to next year. I asked my kids, what is the color of your joy? Now, first of all, you have to have joy to give it a color. And second of all, I thought they're going to hate this project. But Danny, Cedric, everyone, they just went off. They went off, creating these amazing palettes. And then what we did is we went to the Garment Center in New York City, walking to these old Jewish-owned shops. Family's been in the neighborhood for decades. And here we come in like a baseball team. And Hiram Hendler is one of the good ones. And we walked in, and she goes, now this is going to be interesting. Can I help you? And we're matching all this stuff. And she goes, what are you going to do with this? And said, we're going to make art out of it. And what we do is the ribbons spill out onto the floor, transforming our prison into a flowing river. This is a work we made in Kansas City in which I asked the kids to bring in a piece of fabric that meant something to them. And a lot of kids would bring in grandmother's dress, a little scrap. One kid, it was a little gross, but it was sweatpants. His name was Jeremy Chisholm, Native American kid, and they were the sweatpants that he won his first big football game in, and he hadn't even washed them since. We took a very small sample from that piece. This is a work we also made with majority of the African American youth in Kansas City. It is painted on Mark Twain's great novel, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And this is on a piece about the size of the raft, 9 by 12, and it is a portrait of Jim. We took Jim back. This is on the great book Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. We were researching I See the Promised Land by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We were arranging to meet with Dr. Ellison, and he passed away 2 weeks before our appointment, which broke my heart, and constantly trying to do something to do justice to this book. We saw those great signs. Dr. King, went to Memphis in '68 to deliver that final apocalyptic sermon, and he went to support the Memphis sanitation workers, and they all held up a sign saying, "I am a man." And we said, I am. We were also doing works based on the book of Exodus, in which God appears to Moses, and Moses says, "Who the hell are you?" And God says, "I am." And then on the day we saw that, there was a New York Post newspaper on our studio table that had a headline about a murder victim, which of course caught my eye and catches my eye every day. And so we decided to take the "I am" from the word victim, enlarge it, and have it painted in blacks and blues by 24 kids. This is our website, and we'll tell you the address. You can come up to me later. It's really www.diacenter. We're doing Prometheus Bound after Aeschylus, and we're having dialogues with kids all over the world and scholars about the meaning of Prometheus. What is this fire that Prometheus brings down to humankind and gets him into so much trouble? And you can also, people want to know what the dialogic process, the learning process of our work is. Well, we can give you the example. This is Danny here talking about the fire Prometheus represents ideas. That's Danny and Manny and I having a conversation about Prometheus for everyone to see. And these are actual works done by kids in Bristol and in Kansas City. This is a piece done in Kansas City in which kids create that luminous petal that's the origin of all art and the teacher of all humankind. And this is done by Evans Ryan, and he is from our group in Chicago. One of the most gifted little kids I ever met. 13 years old, and he's all that. I See the Promised Land are 2 works. You've seen the poster everywhere. It's going to be actually mounted on the wall tomorrow in the gallery. And this is Erica Webb painting her color of her hope in the middle of a triangle. The work is also presented, glued onto the walls in galleries. It is martyred after the show is done, but we have a sample of the paint, and we recreate it in every new venue. Almost 200 of these works by 200 kids from all over the United States will be presented at the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee this next fall. Painted on the writings of Dr. King. We also take these and glue them outside into the streets so they're accessible to all the passersby. And that's a text in and of itself. That's a text in and of itself. It was amazing because when we did this work in Munich and when we do this work all over the country, I made a piece for African History Month with 55 kids, little kids in Albany, New York. And what was astounding is that we were watching Dr. King on the video, and I'm looking at this sea of faces, totally diverse in terms of ethnicity and class and culture. And he's talking about, I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I'm going to tell you that as a people, and that's as a total people, as a nation of people, as a beloved community, we will get to the promised land. And what was so astounding is I'm looking out at this next generation, these new kids, and it is true. They are the promised land. It is happening. It is coming. There's nothing you can do to stop it. You can't even struggle with it. Why? Because it is righteous, it is profound, and it is real. And I firmly believe that it is of God. It's that trip to the promised land which is the function and the action of art. And I know what art is all about now, because the last work that Chris Hernandez made, From the Earth to the Moon, you can see him making it in the video, was acquired by the Hirshhorn Museum. About 6 months ago, wasn't it, Danny? How many months? I can't, it's a blur. 6, 7 months ago, we received an invitation. There's a recent acquisition show at the Hirshhorn, and they said, do you want to come and see the painting? And I said, I haven't seen it since Chris' death, and I want to think about it. And it was Danny and Robert, and everybody said, we never knew Chris. And we heard so much about him. Can we go? We want to see it. And I said, all right, I think I'm ready. And we take the train down, we take the cab to the Hirshhorn. Neil Ben Ezra's there, and the staff, and I go, where is it? And he goes downstairs. And the escalator is slowly going down. And my heart is beating. And I'm feeling very anxious. Kids are feeling anxious because I'm anxious. And there it was. And right beside it was a beautiful piece called Monument to Vladimir Tatlin by Dan Flavin. Right beside that was an Anselm Kiefer painting. Right beside that was a Philip Guston painting. Beside that was a Susan Rothenberg painting. And then there's the painting that Chris made. And we sat down, and I just wept. But you know, it wasn't because I was sad. It was because I was glad. It wasn't because I miss Chris, and I do, but he was so totally, profoundly, superhumanly present in that work. He survived. He was more there than when he was alive and I could touch him. And that is when it really hit me what this stuff is all about. Only art can do this. Art is the only way that we can continue to survive and to affirm our voice in a violent and hostile nation and universe. Nothing can stop it. Nothing can destroy it. It will be there forever. Only art can do this. It does not move. It is a manifestation of our hope. It is the invisible made visible, and it is vision made material. Through these works, we survive as individuals, as a people, and as a culture. And you can't make me doubt this because I am a witness. Break-a-kex, coax, coax, coax. Did you have a good time? Yeah! We're going to raise a roof right off of this school. Am I right? Yeah! I was there. I don't want to go back there. I'm going over here. Come on with me. You want to get on the bus? You want to get on the train? Get on. Get on the train. I'm going right now. Woo!